My name is Peter Watson. I work in Counties Manukau. I work in the Child and Adolescent Mental Health unit called Whirinaki. And I've been working in counties for a decade and a half. Alongside that journey, I've been involved with SPINZ. I was involved in the very genesis of it, and I'm still here to this day. I guess some of the things that worry me are that we haven't made as good a progress as we would have hoped. And in my clinical practice life, I have seen, I'm involved with youth primarily, and the rates, as people have said, of deaths on the roads have plummeted dramatically, from near around 1,000 to now around 300, and we just haven't seen those declines in the rates of suicide deaths. We have seen some, particularly in the rates of youth. There have been some declines, but there are still far too many, obviously. So it is timely, I think, to continue these conversations and to think creatively about what we can do differently. Which is why I guess I was so interested in this topic. This topic, to me, represents one of the new potential areas where we can do things differently. 15 years or so when we started out, we didn't have social media in the way we do today. I was certainly raised in a very different world. There were no computers, let alone microwaves and calculators. So things have changed dramatically. The question, I guess, is how do we do it? How do we use it? And these are questions, I guess, where there may not be as much evidence as there has been in other areas, but today we're fortunate to have a panel of experts who will talk about their interests, their experiences and their knowledge, and of course all of you. So we're going to start with a panel discussion, and then we're going to open the floor to questions and comments. I suppose my interest is also very personal, perhaps as many other people's is in this topic, and particularly around social media. In the last 24 hours, I've had one of my children, aged 13 in year 9 at a local high school, on one instance be on his Facebook page, and me walking along and him not wanting me to see it, as is common, and me saying, well, that's part of the deal, about you using it and having a look and seeing this stuff on it, which just makes me hold my head and go, no, this is wrong. To this morning when he says to me, Dad, our health teacher yesterday was talking to us about resilience, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's sort of interesting. What did he teach you? And he says, well, he was telling the story about when he was a young man in London. And there was a chap on the platform there, and obviously things had been getting to him, and he wasn't very happy and miserable, and he jumped off in front of a train. So at that point, we had this amazing discussion about what that might have been about, what was this issue about resilience, and what was the teacher getting at, and we had a fantastic conversation. And I suppose for me, being of a generation where we didn't have Facebook pages, I'm thinking, I know which I'd prefer to have here, man. I'd be preferred to go with the conversations with my boy rather than let him go on the Facebook and do the stuff that I can't see. I guess the reality is all that social media is here. It's not going away. We've got to get with it and learn about how to use it in a positive way to promote mental health. So that's our challenge. That's my interest. I'm going to hand it on down the panel for people to introduce themselves, their interests, and then we'll start the conversations.
Kia ora, quarter pounder. Okay. Kia ora koutou. This is what tall people see. Ka pai. Ko Kingi Biddle tōku ingoa. My name is Kingi Biddle. To be perfectly honest, to be perfectly frank, even though my name isn't Frank, I actually don't work in the great mahi that you work in. The reason that I'm here is for the last 23 years or so I've been involved in a medium that might be able to help, and that's the medium of broadcasting. And in the last 20 years working in Māori radio. One of the things I love about Māori radio, especially when it started, was that we were able to hear Māori stories, Māori language, coming from a Māori perspective. No matter where you lived, a kuia could hear her mokopuna on the radio, a kuia could hear her stories, a koroua could hear what's going on with their land claims, and that was the beauty of Māori radio. And so that's why I'm here, is because nā te kaupapa e whaitia nei e koutou, me te kaupapa e aroha nuitia nei e au, a kine pēr ka whai huarahi ai tātou. Kia ora.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Chris Banks. Thanks very much, Peter. It's the first time I've ever been referred to as an expert in anything, which is great. I came out as a gay man when I was a teenager, and I had a very different coming out earlier this year when I decided to tell the world that I have bipolar disorder. I started a blog called Bipolar Bear, and when I was diagnosed, it was, I went through the dual things of it being daunting and it being a relief. I mean, so much about my life made sense, but there were also all sorts of other questions. I was worried about, am I going to end up in hospital? What are people going to think of me? All that kind of thing. So I struggled with this for a couple of years, and I really only told close friends and family that about my mental illness. But earlier this year, I came out of quite a really low period of depression in January and came out of it really wanting to do something. And I thought, well, given that I work in the field of mental health and the other career I have is I'm a filmmaker in the entertainment industry, which is tolerant of all sorts of weirdos, it was kind of safe for me to do this, whereas perhaps someone working in a regular sort of office job might not be able to. So I thought, okay, I'll start this blog, I'll start talking about my thoughts and feelings and what it's been like for me. What I didn't expect was how quickly a community grew up around this blog, and just in a few short months, around 750 people on a Facebook page, thousands of page views per month. And, I expected there to be replies and the odd thing, but what's really started happening is conversations, people coming on, opening up about their own lives, telling their own stories. And I think this is really where the power of social media is. And I think that's actually a very positive thing. I think at the most high-risk level, there will be people who will express their suicidal thoughts online, and these might be people that might never have expressed these thoughts in any other way. So it's actually a new opportunity, I think, rather than a threat. And I've seen this happen in the months that the blog and the Facebook page has been online. And this has also happened through the Nutters Club as well, both with people coming on the Facebook page and even calling the radio show. It's these opportunities that weren't there before for people to talk. I'd really like to mihi to Eliza Snellger, who said this morning, I've been writing everything down, we're not here to talk about suicide, we're here to talk about life, light, and self-determination. Because I think that we really need to look at how we can use the internet and social media as a force for improving our mental health and well-being. I wrote a blog post earlier this year about an initiative they were holding in America called the National Day of Unplugging, which was encouraging everyone to turn off their computers and phones and everything and start talking to people. I didn't think it was a good idea, as you may be able to tell. For some people, they find it very difficult to talk to others, and technology is the medium in which they use to reach out to other people. And I said at the time in a blog that I was writing that we have to stop blaming technology for the disconnection that exists within our society. It is a huge tool for people with experience of mental illness who've experienced stigma and discrimination to actually be able to reach out to other people in a way that they might not have been able to before. So that's my passion and interest for being here today.
Hauora.
I'd like to press like on Chris's comment there and retweet it. My name is Taimi Allen, and I'm the program leader for Like Minds Like Mine in Mind and Body Consultants here in Auckland. Part of my job is to coordinate things like the Rethink Grant and their associated artistic events and projects that we rely heavily on social media to portray the right kind of like minds messages to try and reduce stigma and discrimination for people who have experienced mental distress. I'm also a professional actor, and I use those networks really blatantly to work alongside some mainstream media, some scriptwriters, producers, directors and actors to try and get mental illness portrayed a little bit more positively than it has been in the past. And sometimes we make great inroads with that, and sometimes we fail dismally. But in terms of my experience in mental health, I hold a QBE. Who else holds a QBE? It's qualified by experience. I've been lucky or unlucky enough to have survived 8 different mental disorder diagnoses. They couldn't fit me in the right box. I've had 6 really long-term admissions for up to 6 months to 7 months in hospital one time. I've had multiple attempts at suicide in my past. And like Sarah Gordon, I was paddled back by the paramedics in one stage and brought back with me a very, very fearful death experience. And it was that moment, I think, that I decided that I needed to make some better choices in my life. So that's my expertise in mental health. My expertise in social media is predominantly being a social media junkie. I am on every site. I have multiple profiles, both anonymous and public, on pretty much every site that exists, from video, blogs, forums, networking. In fact, I think I stalked a Google employee when Google Plus first came out to be one of the first people on that too. I'm also an anonymous agony aunt for Yahoo Answers, and my moments of insomnia I use trying to talk to strangers through their thoughts of self-harm and suicide using my own experiences. I'm involved in a feasibility study for new online peer support services, and I've been developing programs in schools for teachers on the impact of perfectionism, impulsivity, which is what Stephanie was talking about, and the social media on the mental health of their students, and have developed a Facebook Safety for Educators guidelines. I believe, like Chris mentioned, that social media is the most powerful suicide prevention tool that we have today. There are 8 million people online each day that seek health information. 23 internet users search for mental health information alone, 23%. 35% of all adults have social media profiles, and 1 in 6 people have thoughts of suicide. So 1 in 6 is a big amount to say that that's not a normal part of life. It's about talking through those moments and getting people through the moment. For better or for worse, social media is not tied to the Coroner's Act that Peter Dunn mentioned this morning. So I think we all have the responsibility to moderate unhelpful comments that we find online and to be really vigilant and watch for people that are reaching out. The biggest risk, I think, and my passion is around preventing the impulsive acts of suicide. None of my acts of suicide were planned, and many of the cases that I've been involved with this year were also marked as impulsive, but at each one of those cases they reached out sometimes only 10 minutes before via social and new media. That's including text messaging. So I think we have the responsibility to listen without judgment and really look online for those signs and be really quick to respond to them. Because if you're prepared to friend someone on Facebook, then you must be prepared to be their friend.
Hauora.
Thank you.
Ko taupiri te maunga, ko wakato te awa, ko wakato te iwi, ko ngati tipu te hapu, ko te amarahi tuku marae, ko Tainui te waka, ko Tammy Hohaia tuku ingoa, he kaimahi ahau mō Ruakura Hauora Tainui. So I work for Ruakura Hauora Tainui. We're based here in Manukau. I am part of the National Māori Suicide Prevention Strategy Kia Piki Te Ora. Myself, as a whānau member and friend to many, nationally and internationally, I'd have to say that suicide and suicide themes pop up in pretty much everyday conversation, pops up on chat. When you're Skyping someone over in England, you know, there's a suicide program in the background or documentary. So I think suicide's pretty much, it's everywhere. You know, it's pretty much bombarding well, the people that I know anyway. So we see it in our movies, we see it on our TV programs, newspapers, and right through social media. And I do think that social media can be used to our advantage, just to kind of combat where we see suicide in these other forums. So I think because from what I'm seeing, suicide is becoming a credible way out. It's like a credible option, and I think that needs to change. And social media, it's new, it's exciting, and I think if we get in there, and it's still pretty young and early, so I think if we get in there, we can really use that to our advantage to you know, get these rates down and to address suicide themes.
Woo-wee. What an awesome panel. Kia ora koutou, my name is Kayte Godward. I'm the Sector Relationship Manager for Lifeline Aotearoa. I am also the Relationship Manager for the National Depression Initiative. So we hold the Lowdown, the Journal and the NDI Helpline. So you'll have seen lots of those ads out there that use social media to drive people to the website and then to drive people towards support. I have a personal interest in this kaupapa. I too am bipolar. I too am also an actress. So I'm a professional actor. I work in the entertainment industry as well, I know. And I'm also experienced bipolar. So I have a real passion for making sure that people like myself are kept safe and have the support around them. And also I believe that the Māori and Pacifica communities, we really, really do need to start moving into those communities more so we can deal with this. Kia ora.
What's your best offering about how these new social medias can be used as a force for improving mental well-being?
I talked about the Journal before and I talked about the Lowdown, and I think, Francis Kora and Jane Yee were really, really good examples of how we can use television, TVCs, to drive people to the online website where people can hear about other youths and their experience with all sorts of different things, but mostly the most important thing is to hear other people talking about issues that are going on in your life, so that it opens up a space for that kōrero to happen. So I think that's a really good example of how it works in social media.
I think social media is an impulsive tool. I mean, no one really writes down about 1 million times what they're going to say before they post it on Facebook, unfortunately. But
I do.
But I think that's a good thing that's impulsive, because it encourages openness and honesty and that transparency that we probably need. We don't have enough conversations about in real time. So I guess as an example, it is if you can role model being open and honest about your own feelings online, then people that probably feel more bad more of the time than they feel good also know that people who feel more good more of the time also have moments of feeling bad. So it's about role modelling that.
I can think of one woman in particular who is a regular contributor on the Bipolar Bear Facebook. She actually lives in Australia, and she's a parent. She hears voices. She has 2 young children and a husband. And over time, because she's quite open and very, very honest about what's going on for her, including the kind of the visions that she experiences when she's distressed, the people who are on the forum, including myself, have been able to track her moods over time and been able to provide some perspective for her when perhaps she's been using alcohol as a way to numb the pain. She'll come online when she's drunk and she'll say that she's drunk. And there have been times also where we've made sure that over the months we've been able to get to know her better and actually find out more about where she is and where she lives, so that if we see a real situation of crisis emerging, then we can contact the appropriate people. But that's someone reaching out, an example of someone reaching out that it's quite clear from what she's writing that she's not openly communicating with the other people in her life, including her husband sometimes, about the way that she's feeling. And she really feels the pressure because around the what she sees and feels, and because she's a mum and she worries that she can't be a good parent. So there's a lot of pressure there, and being able to be in an environment where there are other women with mental illnesses who also are parents, and they can provide her that kind of support.
I think what Chris is saying also about trying to tangibly find out people that might be in danger where they live, so that if things do turn to custard, you can help. It's a really good idea. And there has been cases where strangers from other sides of the world have actually saved people's lives, even though they didn't know where they lived, by just calling their local emergency number and telling them the IP address that they've come from or where they've found the information from, and they've saved people's lives that way. So don't ever feel helpless, even if you don't know the person.
So I also have I know of a case that happened just recently. There was someone's Facebook activity. It was there were a lot of warning signs there with her postings and her updates. They were really they're a bit on the depressive side, let's just say. So they were very, one of the things she was doing was giving away her prized possessions. So she was giving away jewellery that she owned, and she was really basically setting herself up for her exit. And so what we had was one of her cousins saw these signs and took it upon herself to ring her dad, who lived not in the same neighbourhood as this girl, to check in on her. And so she saw this activity, the cousin who identified these signs as being warnings. So what she done was she carried on her way with her Facebook activity. I think she had a bit of a chat with another cousin. She went to bed that night and remembered that she was supposed to ring her uncle. So she rang her uncle the very next morning, and her uncle went over before he went to work just to check in on her. And unfortunately, she did manage to complete her suicide, and which is really unfortunate. But it just goes to show that people can be aware of the signs online, and if only she had rung her uncle, that straight after she saw these signs, it may have been different. But I mean, that's not the way it rolled out, and she's still done a great job in getting to her uncle to check on her.
I'm holding up a pen, and the kōrero many years ago was the pen was mightier than the sword. And if I put this pen over there, the pen does nothing. It's only until the time that I pick up the pen and start to use it, then the pen and the words that I write with the pen are able to be used. Now, out there in the social media, Facebook, me wera atu mea, there are many opportunities for us. There are many pages that are coming up about people who have passed away, those memorials that people are talking about. And one of the things is that I heard today is that many people are fearful that it can create copycat whakamomori. But this is what I say to us, is it's also an opportunity for us to create possibility. It's an opportunity for us to create opportunity. And that is for us to go into that is an opportunity for us to go into there and promote those messages that can be read by people. If you look at YouTube currently, there's a group that haka everywhere, don't they?
Yeah.
The flash mob, aren't they? They're at Sylvia Park Market, they're at Queen Street. Now, I saw that yesterday. The whole of the motu know about it. That's how fast social media works. There's on Facebook, there's a page where if you are a kapa haka freak, then you can go onto that page. It's called Guess That Haka Blah. Hey, there's about 3,000 people on there, fast. So those people have got it. They know how to get that message out fast. It's a pen, a very sophisticated form of a pen, but whose hands is that social media in? It's in ours. Who's committed to making a difference? We are. So that's the kōrero that I have. My kōrero is in regards to bringing those messages. What could those messages be? If you're into the 80s with Wham, choose life. And the other thing too is that we have a tupuna in Aotearoa. His name was Tunahopu, and many of us have tupuna like him. There was a time back 200 years ago when in war his son was taken from him. And over a year he mourned. He pined for his son to the point where he said to himself, I'm going to die. I'll die of loneliness, or I'm going to get my son and die from the people who have him captured. Irrespective, I'm going to die. And so he went there and he got his son. And the tupuna who had the son kidnapped saw the courage of a man who came in to collect his son. And then that tupuna who had that boy's son kidnapped said, please stand up. I'm in the presence of a rangatira. And then he gave the son, and they Tupuna Tunahopu and his son Taioperua came home. In fact, they were given a guard to make sure that they got home. We don't need to look at movies when we have stories like this. I have a tupuna ko Tunahopu. There are tupuna up north, about a tupuna by the name of Hohaia. We have tupuna like Turongo. We have our own stories. And this is an opportunity for us to create a robust structure. The before, which many of the marketing people and the communication people can create, and then of course we have the masters here who are able to read the net to find those ones who are about to fall. So that's my little kōrero to us, e hoa ma. YouTube should be something like our tube. Because, one last thing, Mr. Chair, where's the power when it becomes our tube? The power becomes ours, and with the power, we are able to do something. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora.
The issue I want to pick up with then is this bit about the net and when people slip through. Okay, so we're all on social networking, or we want to be on social networking, or we're, whatever it is that's going on. The question I guess that I have, and I guess other people might have, is, does the medium that's being used change the content of the message? In other words, it's not the same as talking to somebody face to face. So if somebody's telling me face to face that they, feel helpless, hopeless, they'd rather be dead, I'm going to take that pretty seriously. I can gauge how they are in a face-to-face conversation. I can't do that online. It's coming across on a computer screen. So my question is, when do we worry? And what do we do with that worry?
I think it's best to start worried and work backwards from there. I mean, it's easy. If people just say, oh, look, sorry, it was just a joke, I didn't really mean it, then that's fine, that's great. But if you start with real empathy and real concern and validate that those feelings that they have under the context of what they're experiencing are really valid and natural human emotions, then we can kind of work backwards as humans from there. I think it doesn't matter that we can't see people's face or people's expressions. If you've been following their posts, or even if you haven't really, you can tell whether someone is online every day and has suddenly dropped off for a few days, and you can check in to see how they're feeling. You can see whether their posts go up and down in terms of their moods, how honest they are about the way they're feeling. And I think that social media, because of the anonymity, or at least the perceived anonymity of it, means that people are a little bit more honest and open with how they're feeling in that moment. And for us, listening to those moments, it's about just getting them through that moment. It needs to only be that second or that minute that you're on. And it's about, helping them survive that moment, and keeping them away from the past and what they're worried about in the future. I think that's what we can do with social media.
On the lowdown, we get tens of thousands of text and email messages every month from young people, and we do so many interventions. It's incredible how many interventions, suicide interventions, that we will do with a young person. It does not matter that we cannot see their face. The point is that we're engaging with them and we're listening to them, and we're picking up on the cues that they're giving us, and we ask them the question. And if they might turn around and say, nah, or they might turn around and start engaging with us, and then we just start listening to their reasons for dying and their reasons for living, and then we work with the reasons for living.
I find that people are way more open online as opposed to face-to-face. And I think that, for example, go on Facebook or other social media sites, and rangatahi in particular, our youth, they let their whole life story out online. So they're very open online, and I think face-to-face is good, but it might be a bit intimidating because I kind of find that myself. So it's easier to work through a different forum, so have like a third party, so you'll use like social media sites and stuff. instead of to relay your message to someone. It's just a bit easier, it's less intimidating, and you can't read their facial cues. You can't see if they're judging you or not. So I think it's another excellent form.
And it's not just Facebook, there's a whole lot of help sites out there where you can create your own avatar and be whoever you want to be. So that anonymity means that people do express what they're feeling quite openly.
I think that it's not the content of what people are writing that changes, but it's how it's potentially perceived by others. And some people don't take what they see posted on the internet or social media seriously enough. And there have been some horrific cases. There's an entire Wikipedia page devoted to social media and suicide, and there have been some horrible cases overseas where people have posted that they're going to do something, and people didn't react, or perhaps thought they were joking and even egged them on.
Or filmed it live, I think was one case.
Yeah. And so there are those cases where, it's not taken seriously. I mean, at the other end of the scale, I had a friend yesterday who posted as a status update something along the lines of, "Don't you think there's just some days when you just have to ask why?" And I phoned him up just to see how he was very surprised to hear from me. And I just said, "Look, I didn't think you were going to throw yourself off a bridge or anything. I just was concerned about you, just wanted to check in and see how you were." And as it was, he was just having one of those days. But I think it's always important to check, and you just have to ask the question and start a conversation with somebody. And if you're really worried about the content of what they're writing, if they're starting to have a continual dialogue around something, saying like, what's the point, or I don't think my kids would be better off without me, that kind of thing. That's when it's appropriate to actually ask the direct question, have you been thinking about harming yourself? It's okay to ask that question, because that's when you can really find out if somebody is at an emergency point or whether they're just needing to talk further.
And don't be afraid to ask that question. I think too many people are afraid to ask online because it is so public. I mean, most of those social networking sites have those little private messages you can send someone as well if you don't know their phone number, and that's important. But I think in terms of asking the question, when you get into big private conversations with people, once you've tried to seek some help, I find it really useful to ask those questions around why it is that they think that things would be better if they weren't here. Because when you get to the underlying issues, and perhaps they're issues of being overwhelmed, or they need a freedom from pain or responsibility or guilt or financial strain, all of those things are stuff that we can deal with without having to have counselling qualifications, just by being humans to other humans. And if we can find the underlying issue that makes them feel that they're better off not on earth, then we can address the other solutions that there are out there that they might not be able to think about in that moment of pain.
I'm not aware of many services engaging in social media discourse with groups of clients on a large scale. So I'm wondering whether we might be venturing into that. I wonder what your thoughts on it. It would be a radical thing, certainly, where I work in the DHB, to have clinicians engaged in social networking conversations with their clients. We're all very conscious of boundaries and keeping ourselves safe. And I guess, do we have clinicians who will then be friending clients on Facebooks? And you hear of some of those sorts of issues coming up in schools between teachers and students. And I think it's an area of concern, and no one's quite sure where we might be going with that, and I just wondered if you had some thoughts.
We've been looking at some really good examples of those sorts of services that are online overseas, and two really amazing ones that I've come across that I really like is the SAMHSA website, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in the US, and their basic avatar and kind of peer-led conversations with suicide survivors. And the other one is called the Big White Wall, and that's a UK-based website where people can actually not only help each other but use their creativity to create a brick that then goes in the wall to help others, and everyone can look at it. And that's a really lovely way of finding the positive aspects of some of these experiences. So there's some of the things that we're looking at. But I mean, you run a text-based...
Oh yeah, so one of the things that we have is for the Lowdown, it's called a message board. So when young people go onto the Lowdown website, they can choose to either go in and navigate it on their own, or they can go through with like Jane Yee or Awa from Niche and Mystic. There's 4 avatars here that they can go through with. And once they get in there, there's a peer message board. So it's other young people talking about their experience in real time with young people who are coming through the site. One of the things that we do is we moderate it. So we have our operators, senior operators, who are able to moderate any of the messages. So if there's any risk messages there, they won't be put up, they won't be posted, but we will contact the person directly. Often though, the young people who are engaging in the message board with each other are also engaging with the Lowdown. So they're getting the support through text or email services.
I'm not sure everyone knows or is up to play with avatars.
Okay, well sorry, I used the word avatar. It was actually a navigator. You used the word avatar. So the navigators are just people, so characters that you can go through with. So you can go on the journey either by yourself, as yourself, or you can go on the journey as somebody else. And sometimes you can choose really cool things like, I know Sparks, you can choose to be a Māori warrior, you can choose clothing and, you know, different kind of traits, and they're pretty cool and they engage with young people. But for our one, it's actually like real celebrities that they can go through the website with.
Yeah, basically an avatar is creating yourself however you want to look. So you might have big red mohawk or something, or you might be a dragon. It's about creating a version of yourself that you're willing to put online. And Sparks is a gaming platform that has been developed by the University of Auckland, I think, that is being trialled on youth at the moment.
Can I just make the quick point that it's not just young people that are heavily involved in engaging in social media, and most of the people that I would engage with would be aged 30 and up. And it certainly would be the same if you were to look at there's about 5,000 people connected through the Nutters Club page now. And it's the same there. So although that we seem to associate social media and that with younger people, that it is actually something that people who are middle-aged and older are engaging in just as much and being just as open about their lives online.
Barry Taylor, Wairarapa District Health Board. As you may know, there's been a range of suicides of young people in our community. The biggest problem that we have had in the last week is the rumours, false information of people suiciding. And what happens to a community of people is that sometimes a mythology becomes a reality, and that therefore people believe that actually everyone is suiciding. To me, the question is not about the benefit, is how do we actually deal with it when it becomes unhelpful?
Over to a panellist.
When you had the public meeting recently, which was it last night or a couple of nights ago, that a lot of that, I believe, was about dispelling a lot of the myths and rumours that have been going around in the community. So what sorts of things do you say at those meetings? Because I think that would be helpful to know what those kind of dialogues are so we can take those back online.
Sorry Barry, can I just hold you 1 minute? That'd be great, but I just wonder if we got a specific answer to his question about what do we do? Because your suggestion, Chris, is to take that advice and put it back online. Is that the answer to the question about what to do, or is there another answer to that question about how to deal with that online?
I think that would be part of it, because I think that the rumours that go on in a community after there's a series of suicides, those discussions are going to be happening all over the place. The benefit of social media is that those discussions are flushed out into the open where we can see them. So we can actually go in there potentially and engage in the discussion. But some of us might not know what to say if there's a whole dialogue going around about, oh, I heard that this such and such was happening and this was happening. Because I know there's a particular page that Barry's talking about where those rumours were flying around on Facebook. And I mean, you can put stuff up and take the discussion in a completely different direction and say, look, here's a support number you can call, or here's this. But in order to, how do you address those rumours directly?
One thing that we did as a DHB is we create our own Facebook page. So we actually use that. the difficulty is getting the people to like it in terms of making it becoming just as viral as the other ones, and that's always the challenge. But I think, like even the way that, like Chris, you contacted, said, you know, how can we help? Like, how can we intervene? It's how do we change the narrative is the question, is interrupt the thinking.
Yeah.
So,
I think the answer to that is you need to get better at social media than they are at spreading the message. But you're already starting that with the meetings that you had last night, with this newspaper article that was in the paper yesterday saying that there is no mass teen suicide pact. You know, it is rubbish, it's a myth. It's about using the media back. And it's using mainstream media, it's using social media, it's using people like people on the panel that use the media all the time that can use our huge, enormous networks to pass that message on even further. And it's kind of just having maybe 2 or 3 really good contacts that you know are great networkers in that field that can push back that message and cut that conversation really short, really quickly.
And the other thing that you might want to do, and coming from a media standpoint, is the main thing for myself that you need to have, and that is to have, you can have all the context that you need to get the message out, but you need to have a message. And one of the good things about that is getting together a press release. Get together a press release and stick to it.
We all have te reo irirangi in our regions, and I'm Awa FM in Te Korimako o Taranaki. If there's one way of actually getting this kōrero out there, then let's go back to our own te reo irirangi and develop a program where we can have a half-hour session for our rangatahi to ring in and kōrero to us. Kia ora koutou.
Aroha mai whae. And the other thing too that is the beauty of Te Ao Reo Irirangi Māori is that we are now linked to the net. And so what that means is that uri of Whanganui, uri of Ngā Motu of Taranaki overseas are also able to be privy to that information and to those kōrero to the point where they can even contribute as well. And that's now, Māori radio is not only going to New Zealand as a whole, but it's going global as well. And the other thing too, and jumping into that, is not just Māori radio. Any place that you can get that message out, got a few.
Just got some questions in relation to this whole avatar and narrator side of things, because isn't that again increasing the level of disconnectedness when we're talking about the whole ability to deal with suicide is actually a greater level of community and connection, and doesn't this then place them further out? And so just wondering from your guys' perspective, what do we do about that? Are they already somebody that we would consider a potential risk, that they can't even be themselves, that they've got to try and be someone that they're not? Should we not already think that they are worth giving attention to in that? And then also another question kind of tying with that is, how do you then get them from social media into an actual conversation? Because I think getting an illiterate generation that don't know how to have a conversation is dangerous in itself.
You know, sometimes we've got to trial things out, and sometimes it's easier to stand behind versions of ourselves. It doesn't mean it's not us, it's just a different version of us, until we feel safe enough that the people out there who are actually able to listen, it's not just about people opening up, it's about people out there who are prepared to listen.
It's about being really afraid. If you're too afraid to be yourself, then you might not be too afraid to be someone else, and that's when the conversations start. And if we didn't have things like avatars and pretend names on the internet, that maybe those conversations would never start. So it's a real opportunity for us to, maybe they are the more vulnerable people, but I mean, I have both public profiles and private profiles depending on what I want to ask people and what answers I'm expecting to get. I mean, some of the things that you feel that you're going to, for better or for worse, feel that you're going to be more judged on are perhaps the things that you're going to hide behind a persona, so to speak, to try and find some answers for. And when you're speaking to those personas, then you can start directing them towards services that might be also online but might make them available, you know, to start speaking and have real conversations. And also, whether you like it or not, nothing is really anonymous on the web. I mean, if someone was really in danger and you rang, if you rang the police and told them whereabouts you found that message that you were really worried about, they'd be able to search their IP address and find out where that person is. It's not really that hard.
I'd say, I've had 3 occasions this year where I've either myself or someone through my page or a colleague has called a service and intervened based on a post that we've seen. So it is possible to do it.
Kia ora, my name's Adi Walker. I'm an ambassador for the Mental Health Foundation, and they sponsor me to come today because I'm organising a ride called Right Out of the Blue, and some of you may have known it from this year, and we're basically doing a bike ride from the south to the Cape Reinga in March on a bicycle. It's 21 days, and the point of it is for dialogue to be, the dialogue of to raise awareness and reduce the stigma of depression and suicide. And I was thinking about social networking, like without that we can't reach everyone because we can't go to every city, but we're really trying to take the roots, and visiting small cities and holding exhibitions and the whole works. The focus is to celebrate the lives that have been lost. And I mean, obviously for their families, it's not glamorising it because it's celebrating their child, which is, the focus. But how do we make it so that this is, it's crucial, but it's that creating that dialogue without glamorising it. And I don't know how through social, to make sure that doesn't happen through social networking as well.
It's about sort of separating the act from the person. You shouldn't have to not talk about the person or say that person had a bad life. You just have to separate that one act. I mean, it would be the same thing if somebody got drunk and accidentally killed themselves in a car accident. You would not want to never talk about them ever again. So it's about separating those two things.
I mean, I heard a conversation on Radio Live yesterday, which I was quite concerned about because the host was talking about people who commit suicide having being very courageous and noble. No, I'm not saying who it was. But I had a real problem with that because even though I've been there, I'd never felt courageous or noble at that time, and I think that is the fear that we get into in terms of glamorising it. I feel the way to not glamorise... People think that not glamorising it is doing those really silly, unhelpful comments like that's stupid and selfish and things, and that's not helpful either. It's about finding that middle ground that is compassionate and empathetic without condoning it.
Totally understand the social media side of things, but all morning we have heard that community is what we need. We need to be gathering community. Understand that it can happen in the social media context, but I want to know, are the kids you're dealing with, when they get a bit weller, are they getting told about community and about connecting face to face and about touching other people?
Yes. Yeah, and as Chris said, they're not just kids. Most Facebook pages are set up by people or organisations that actually exist in the physical world as well. So maybe the first step is to contact them on social media, and then it's finding about where they are and what other community links they have to support them.
I'd like to really thank our panellists for a wonderful presentation. Thank you, guys.